they actually see kind of a heroism that they realize isn't real once they get there. When they say, hey, I want to go volunteer, they get there and realize, hey, I'm no hero. But they didn't know that going in. And so if you said, hey, this will let you know yourself better, I don't think as many people would.
But then aren't we using those communities for our own gain and selling lies?
I don't see that as selling lies. I see it as, hey, come and volunteer, be a part of this experience. And in the materials, I think most people are probably pretty accurate about saying, look, you're not going to be a hero. You're not curing cancer. You're not going to teach somebody to walk that doesn't have legs. This is going to be about learning from the community, learning about the culture. And our materials say that. But when they go to our website, our feeling is they're going because they want to volunteer. But when they read our materials, we're going to say, don't go into this thinking you're going to cure cancer. You're not. You're going to get more out of this more likely than the community you think you're there helping. It's more about, fellowship and how you're changed and the openness. But I don't even think they read it. Our coordinators give them speeches at the beginning, but I don't think they realize it until they leave and they go home.
It's just like sustainable tourism. You can't really sell it for the sustainability factor. You have to sell it on the experience that the people are going to have. Like, people don't go on eco tours because it uses less water and they grow their own plants. They go on eco tours because of the experience that they think they're going to have, and if they happen to have all these good practices, well, great. And if you have a chance to educate them on the importance of those once they're there, that's where you really get them. But in the whole sustainable tourism field, you're not really going to get a whole lot of clients by selling them on the eco factor. You really got to sell them on the experience factor, and then find those teachable moments once they're there, I think.
So the benefits of the communities that you visit is a byproduct. The real primary goal is a benefit to self.
That's where we're going with volunteer tourism is, those principles, the authenticity, the immersion, the, give back, the be part of the community becomes a set of principles by which most travelers live by, or at least the good travelers live by, as opposed to this is a separate thing that we buy, on Sunday to do, as opposed to, going on a cruise on Monday, So, we're right in the, having seen what ecotourism did for the last 30 years, we're right in the middle, I think. We're where ecotourism was in the 80s, and hopefully we'll grow beyond that. But, I think only time will tell. But I don't think it's peaked. I think it's evolving.
I feel like we've all seen just this huge universe of different facets of volunteerism arise. And I think it's just so confusing for most volunteers. Most people who are looking at the universe of possibilities out here, it's just dizzying compared to 15 years ago if they're saying, I want to go volunteer internationally. And right now there's so many people in it that sorting through it, that there are going to be a lot of negative experiences because there's people who are new at it, who haven't considered various pieces of what they're going to do. But because we've got all these new mediums of tweets and Facebook, all the social media that allows all this feedback that I think will quite naturally and fairly quickly, I would imagine within 10 years, get rid of the ones who aren't committed to doing it right and doing it well, so that what's left will be the really strong, solid formats of volunteerism. And there should be lots of different formats. I mean, there's great faith-based, there's great non-faith-based, there's university. I am sure most of you are aware of BBC, and BBC needing more organizations like this that help volunteers look for what it is they're looking for, because IVPA is just a tiny group, and we have very specific things we agree to do, but there's so many other great types of volunteer travel, and to have other similar organizations, so that if somebody's saying, hey, I want to go to the faith-based international volunteering experience, where can I go to figure out what it is? But anyway, so I don't think that we've peaked, but I feel like we've confused an awful lot of people who are looking at, I want to go volunteer internationally, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. When I search for voluntourism, there's just too many options.
I think the interesting question for me also is, where do you draw the line, right? What is voluntourism? And that seems to be kind of like an undercurrent in the room throughout the day, what Danielle was talking about, and then what Kristen was talking about before as well. Yeah, everyone has, I think, a different definition for what voluntourism is. For me, it feels very similar to a conversation I've had a lot lately about social entrepreneurship, which is another great topic, right? What is social entrepreneurship? Is it just giving jobs, or do you have to be a lot? You can make a lot of different arguments. I think you can make a lot of different arguments for voluntourism. So there's all these different shades of gray. And I think, to me, that's the interesting part of it. And maybe just the fact that we're having the conversation is the important thing.
Notre Dame after I started heavy a few years into starting heavy. And Jeffrey Sachs was speaking, and I was so excited to go see Jeffrey Sachs speak. And the professor I was speaking with, he was like, I don't know if you necessarily agree with Sachs. And I was like, but he wants to help, right? I thought, oh, he's an economist who believes in, in development and wants to help. How matters. How matters, right? Even if we all have the same goal, how matters, right? So, and I think we all would agree with that. So, we're all looking to make changes and improve and inspire changes in 3 different areas, I believe. The local community or ecosystems, this is actually where we're doing our work. This is the thing we're painting or the place we're volunteering or the thing we're cleaning or the, environment we're working with. Our travelers. And then the long-term impact on that organization or that issue, right? This one we can see in our week or our month or our year. We can see those changes. These two take a lot of research and follow-up. And if we're not doing the research and follow-up, then we won't know what kind of impacts we really are having. We had a volunteerism trip. I'm just going to give us an example that came from an Australian company. And it's just the example of the perfect storm. This organization hired an operator in Cambodia. The operator set up tents in the rainy season for these young students to sleep outside this school. So they were going to paint the school. So they were sleeping in about 4 inches of water. There's no transparency. They thought these students were told that their money, they're paying a lot of money for this trip, was going to support the project. But actually, a third party had donated all the money for the project. It was an ineffective project. They were sleeping in water, so these poor kids, how could they really paint? And they just did a really poor job and didn't really finish. And the main ineffective part of the project was this school had no teachers. There was hundreds of dollars being spent on paint, but this school had no teachers. And the average salary of a teacher in Cambodia is less than $100, right? So we could have funded multiple teachers, but we were poorly painting the school. Little to no travelers' education. They were running around in their bikinis. It was really hot. They were drinking beer. The community was drinking beer. In rural Cambodia, alcohol is associated with domestic violence. And then this is just to top it off. About 6 months later, we found out the guy that they'd hired to be the facilitator, who ran an organization called Cambodian Orphan Fund. Tons of operators around the world were using this guy to place their volunteers in orphanages to teach English and these things. He went to jail last year as a pedophile. So many organizations were partnering with this man. Right? So I get to see it because I've lived there for 6 years. Right? That Australian organization, they didn't come back. They didn't see. They don't know. Right? We tried to let them know, but they didn't believe us. And they continue to sell these projects. So how can we prevent this? They pick the cutest kids. They drive out into the rural communities, and I've talked to kids that have had this happen to them, and I've talked to parents, and I've seen this through with the kids coming back. They drive out, and they say, you've got 10 kids. My mom always says, who would give up their child? She's like, if I've had 2 kids, we're never going to have a child. They're giving up their child because they think it's better. They're told, we have foreigners who are supporting this, your kid will get a good education, you've got 10 kids. No, I don't want that one, I want your young, cute girl. We will take care of her. And they're put into places where tourists are allowed to come in, and they push down Pub Street at night with these signs that say, visit our orphanage, free visit. And you walk in, and then they say, oh, you happen to be coming during a show. Happen to have a performance for you. It just happened to 5 times a day. And it's free, don't worry. But our toilet is broken. We need $500 more to fix it. And you're going to give it, and you're going to give it, and you're going to give it, and you're going to give it. And unless we are educating our travelers about this, the reality of some of these situations, they're going to do it. And we're going to be funding this. And that guy, when people find out about him, he scares them out of Cambodia. He's bribing the police at the end of the street so that he can take his kids through. I mean, I was giving money for a long time to an orphanage. It took me a year and a half because he was so gregarious and so polite and so kind. And I would never have known. And people told me, oh, I don't know if I trust him. I said, I trust him. This guy, suffered so much, and this is his life dream. It's a lot. It was a lot. And I don't want more people to have to go through that same heartbreak that I had. Volunteers are not free. another thing. We have a lot of tour companies in Cambodia that are adding visits to different nonprofits into their trips, and without compensating for that time. And I think there's organizations like PEPI, that's part of our mission. I'd happily take any group of students that want to come in and talk to us as part of our mission. And sometimes with other organizations, it's not necessary. We're funding things instead of people. And I think this is the biggest lesson we learned at the nonprofit. PEPI has two parts. We're a nonprofit organization, which is the majority of what we do. We work in 11 schools in rural Cambodia. The smaller part of what we do is PEPI tours. So I get to see this from both angles. And people will say, oh, we have a group and we want to come and we'll donate supplies and we'd like to come visit. But it's not just about things. It's about connecting people to reaching their own goals. Invest in the wrong things and be willing to change. And that's the tricky part. If we're selling an exact itinerary 2 years out, if we're not willing to change that, but what happens if in that year and a half beforehand we find out that that organization was corrupt? We have to be willing to change. Researching and following up and closing that feedback loop. Because when people buy a car and they don't do enough research, they know they mess up. Because the car breaks down, that's okay, they'll do better research the next time. When people donate their time or their money to an organization, unless it's in their community, it's all too often that they never found out that that car broke down and they might continue, right? And I find it interesting, like this Greg Mortensen's situation with the 3 cups of tea. The most staunch defenders are the ones who read his book. It's like reading Ford Motor's autobiography, and then your friend's Ford car breaks down, and you're like, no, your car did not break down. I read Ford Motor's book. This is what we do, right? And I'm just as guilty of this. Investing in people, like that, let's make that our key. That's how we give our money, that's how we give our time, and including our travelers. Let's be explicit. The more explicit we are about the education when we travel, I feel like the more impact we're having. We give articles at night to read. We don't have to force opinions on people. You can give them different articles and let them create their own debate. Say there's an article on your bed at night, come to happy hour at 5 tomorrow if you want to discuss it. There'll be someone there to facilitate it. We bring in guests to speak to them. We bring in nonprofit leaders to talk to them. Because we are selling this. We're selling come help. And unless we are actually following up on that impact, I can't know that that's true. And a large part of what people know about developing countries comes from fundraising campaigns and travel advertising. I know for me it's true. First word I hear, when I hear Ethiopia, the first thing I think about is all the 1980s advertising from nonprofits. So the way that we sell countries is what people think about them. And we have to sell based on the learning and the fit, not the travel and demand. There's a lot of voluntourism companies in Cambodia, and one of them kept hounding us saying, you need English teacher, you need English teacher. And I went and sat down with this guy. I said, what's going on? Why are you selling English teaching programs? And he's like, yeah, we can't find places to place them, but that's what everybody wants to buy. Is that true? Is that really what everybody wants to buy? Or is that what everyone is selling? Right? If we sell the reality of an opportunity to learn and give back in the future, people will buy it if we sell it in the right way. Do people know Priscilla Macy and Global Sojourns? She's made a really cool educational booklet that she sends out to her travelers beforehand. I think it's awesome. You should definitely download it. I have it on my blog, but get it from her too. So this is a story from
to people when we talk about tourism and volunteering is tourism is an export, right? It's the only export where the consumer comes to the producer, right? That's pretty cool, right? Imagine if you had other exports like that where you could build cars and the consumers came to use the cars in your country as opposed to exporting them, right? So tourism is an export, and just getting individuals to understand that is half the battle, because the money spent abroad is money that stays abroad, hopefully, with the local destinations. So my biggest challenge when talking about volunteering and talking to groups like volunteer sending organizations is just to get them to recognize that the money spent at the local level, no matter what it's spent in, is, whether it be, obviously not illicit activities, but either volunteering or tourism, is still going to have positive economic benefits on the local destination. So with that, we need to look at a little bit about what's important to a volunteer. I know I don't need to tell you guys, there's a good study that Planetera led up this last year that looked at what do volunteers need? Well, they need clarity. They need to understand where their money is going to and how it's being used. And we heard that from Daniela, and we see it a lot. Volunteers are also looking for a more meaningful interaction with their home communities. And as Daniela said, they're not necessarily always looking to volunteer. They're looking for meaningful interactions. So how do we, as a destination, kind of build upon that? And why is this attractive? I was just in Belize for the last 2 weeks, and every tour operator I talked to and every tour guide was saying, we get a lot of students, we get a lot of volunteers, we get a lot of researchers. Do you know how I can tap into that market? And I said, well, yeah, I know some people that can help you do that. And I said, but it seems like they just have favorites, and they just, university calls Joe. And, how can we capitalize that from a destination perspective? And so then I turned it back to them, and I said, well, why do you care? Why do you want this type of tourist? And they said, well, we think they're a little bit more willing. Belize, we really don't have the nicest hotels. They do have some nice hotels, but they don't have the nicest hotels. And frankly, there's a lot of bugs. And I had some graduate students there, and I was a little surprised at how unwilling they were to deal with the bugs. But they have a lot of bugs, and they have a lot of kind of half-done things. And so they said, we think the volunteer tourists and the academic tourists are a little bit more willing to live with the bugs and the lack of resources. And I said, yeah, typically that's what's perceived. We perceive that volunteers and scientists and researchers are looking for something that's not quite polished. They don't need all the bells and whistles. So this is attractive to a destination because it represents a market that they don't need to be 5-starring. In 2007, they did some research in Costa Rica, and they figured out that volunteers stay longer and they're more on the ground. They spend more time on the ground, but they actually spend less. And I think you find that when you bring in a traditional volunteer and they're kind of in a package, they come in with an operator and they do the volunteer activity and they leave, they spend less. But there are ways to encourage them to spend more. And I'll give you a really good example. I was in Belize on Saturday trying to fly from one place to another, which isn't the easiest thing to do in Belize. I was in this tiny little airport, about the size of this table, I think. And I was waiting, and a group of American missionaries came in. It was 35 American Texans. 35 Texans in a room this size. It was, I couldn't help but overhear what the conversation was, right? And so, as a matter of fact, I think I went to the restroom just to, get out of there. But, so they came in, and they were missionaries, and they were doing great work. They're building houses. And I said, I asked them what they were doing. They said, we built 2 houses we've been here for 3 weeks. We brought in $12,000, and we built 2 houses. And I said, that's great. And I said, what are you doing here? And they said, well, we decided to give ourselves a couple days off, and we're going to try to go down to the beach. And I said, that's great. And they said, but, we need to figure out how we can fly there. So the general manager of the airport was telling them, that it would cost them about $1,000 to fly 35 people. They were going to charter 2 planes to get them from point A to point B. It cost about $1,000. And they said, well, we have $1,500 left in our budget, so we can afford it. But we think maybe it'd be better to try to get some rides, some people to give us rides there, because that way we can use the $1,000 for the poor people. And the general manager, I could have kissed him. He didn't miss a beat. He was this general manager of a 2-person airport in the middle of nowhere, and he said, well, I have some needy employees, and they could really benefit from the $1,000 too. And the guy laughed, the Texan, and walked away. And I felt like running after him and grabbing it, and it was a light bulb moment for me, because I said, to me it was, if you looked at the multiplier, if I wanted to put on my economics hat and looked at the multiplier of that $1,000 being spent buying an airplane ticket on all of the ways in which that would ripple down to the community versus what this $1,000 was going to do, which, was unknown. I don't know. They had built 2 houses. They had spent $12,000 and built 2 houses, helped 2 families. as opposed to a potential multiplier that could have kept this airport open for a few more months, or maybe would have given it the boost to get it off the ground and running for whenever. And they laughed, which is legitimate. But what it told me is we're not, as an industry, really doing a good job in explaining the value of all of our impact on the destination. Not just giving money to the poor, but the value that our money goes, how far our money goes when we spend money and actually do the tourist thing. And clearly vet that we're not going to, the bad people's resorts, etc., but spending money in the local community, encouraging people to do so. I did actually, I couldn't help myself. My plane was late. I did run after the Texan.
For a while. They have no money anymore. And so they did a lot of research before we started this kind of travel piece of Beyond's, and it was sort of a Facebook for the 50 plus. And this is the research. This is what people's life dreams are over the age of 50. 40% of them want to travel. But look at what else they want to do. They want to learn, they want to volunteer, they want to spend time with their friends and family, and they want to enjoy themselves. So they never actually knew that they could do these things together. And their time, they're having less and less time. So now they're realizing that they can actually go to Italy, and they can actually do a volunteer or a service project in Italy, restoring a fresco, and they can learn to cook, and they can learn Italian. So they're multitasking. They're doing all these things on vacation, or that's what they want to do. Women are traveling a lot on their own, whether it's because they are on their own, which many more women are on their own, or because they don't have a partner that wants to do the same things that they do. Women travel on their own more for challenging physical trips as well as challenging cultural trips. This age group, these are all real guests of mine. They did the Camino de Santiago. They didn't do the whole thing. They did 3 weeks of the highlights. So these people are investing in the experiences that they've wanted to have forever. They're going to Machu Picchu, but they want to do something beyond Machu Picchu. They also want to have fun, and I think that's something that we don't talk about enough, the importance of really having fun. This was a great harvest in Mendoza, and this is kind of what we need to integrate into all of our programs. And they're looking for inspiration. They're looking to meet people like Daniela and her staff. They're looking for people that are passionate about what they're doing. They're also accomplishing goals, and this age group is really taking the time and investing in doing programs that are helping them accomplish those goals. Obviously, trekking to Machu Picchu is a big one. They're also focused on experiences. They really want to learn a new skill or a lesson. They want to learn about culture and nature, volunteer, health and wellness. They're taking boats and cruises and active adventures, but they're focused on these experiences. So they're also taking, what we talked about quickly is if they're taking a vacation, they're likely to not go back to that destination again. So if they're going to Peru, they're going to go one time. Generally, there may be 55 to 60 right now. If they go one time, they're definitely going to want to see Machu Picchu. So if you're creating a trip that doesn't include that and they've never been there, they might choose another trip. But they also want to do something where they all are volunteering or they're learning something new. So a lot of people are trying to create these trips that package everything together. I encourage people to create modules that allow people to sort of add on, but have a core that they're doing and then add on to that. And I don't necessarily think that operators, voluntourism operators or traditional operators need to do that themselves. I think partnership is really the future, and finding the right people that's their core competency and packaging things together.
Island, South Carolina. And there's also a stakeholder meeting which our partners at Planetara and some others are working with ATTA at their conference in October as well. So these stakeholder meetings will bring some of the voluntourism, stakeholders and businesses that are working in voluntourism to really discuss some of these questions that we have resulting from the industry survey and some of the feedback that we already received. And following that, we're working on creating draft guidelines.
A global community. I'll talk a little bit about that piece of how I think you talked about it, Mark, in your presentation, so it was a nice layup of how you engage your community to believe in your vision and enable them to have their own vision. And essentially how from a very small story or from a very small gesture you can actually make a big difference in what you do. And so this is our journey to those types of learnings and that type of experience that we've had as an organization. So this is an image of the tsunami that happened in Christmas 2004. And as an insurance company, which is what we are primarily, even though I'm talking about footprints, the Footprints Network, this is a devastating scenario, not only for the people who were there, but for us as a company. We had a lot of our travelers were affected, perished, and a lot of our other travelers, as well as people in our own company, felt very moved and very sort of driven to how do we make a difference. A lot of us are travelers. We've either been to this part of the world, or our travelers in our customer base have been traveling here as well. So we had a real call to make a difference from a very personal perspective, and we thought, well, how do we make that happen in addition to helping our travelers who are in distress? How can we sort of make an immediate difference as in this specific instance, but just in general as an organization? And this is one of the sort of the statements that is often used, but at the time it wasn't. But it was really something that Simon Monk, who founded World Nomads and Footprints Network, was really motivated by. And it kind of is sort of the true north, or the sort of one of the comments that really drive and motivate the Footprints Network. So what did we do galvanized by the tsunami? How did we make that happen into our own business? How do we dovetail that into what we do? So this is us, the insurance company. We have a product. How do we engage our travelers, of whom we have thousands of them around the world from 140 countries traveling all over? How do we engage them with us to help make a difference and to incorporate them into this mix? And that's where the Footprints Network came about and seeded this concept of basically buying, when you're buying insurance, and this could apply to any product, and I'll talk a little bit about that piece, but just how do you engage and how do you bring them into the opportunity to contribute their micro-donation to a specific project that resonates with them, and that they can vote with their wallet through a very small amount of money as they're making a purchase and they're making that credit card transaction. So what we did is we started working and identifying some of the NGOs, grassroots organizations, and nonprofits that we felt would resonate very strongly with not only ourselves, but with our travelers. One of the organizations we worked with was actually Danielle. I think we funded 2 of your projects, Danielle. One was a specific...
One so far.
And to basically work with the NGOs, and this speaks to sort of sourcing a local organization, and Danielle is a great example of how we work with the local in-the-ground operation to sort of help fund what their objectives were.
Story transcends time, culture, location, because it speaks to those, ageless, unchanging truths about the human experience: birth, death, growing up, growing old, kinship, struggling against all odds, etc. That's the story that ideally you want to tell, and it should be infused in everything that you do in your organization. So you use your brand story, in other words, as a way to communicate what you stand for, what you promise, and what your customers will experience. So, the extraordinary appeal of some of the world's most successful brands is based on their mythic qualities. Qualities that have moved people to action since the beginning of time, such as self-reliance, freedom, belonging, self-discovery. These brands have become storytellers of these myths through relevant modern narratives which resonate at a deep emotional level. Now, you may not like their product or their service, but these are firms that in general have a really strong brand story. Next. But great brand stories don't just belong to the big guys. I mean, here's just a small sampling of some very small or mid-sized companies I think have a great brand story. What companies might you have? But when you think about it, even though there are so many companies that are now doing corporate storytelling, there really aren't that many great, memorable brand stories out there. And so, even though there's all this noise in the marketplace, I think, personally, that there's still plenty of room for companies to come up with a very compelling brand story that will break through the clutter. So where do you start? Well, this quote from Sergio Zyman, former chief of marketing at Coca-Cola, I think is spot on. And effective brand strategy starts with a thorough examination of your brand's DNA, the building block that determines how your customers see you and how well your brand meshes with their needs. And one of the tools that my colleagues and I use is what we call an onlyness statement. And it looks deceptively simple, but they're actually pretty tricky to write and get them right. So I'll show you a couple of examples of an onlyness statement in just a moment. But essentially, this is as easy as, quote unquote, you are the only fill in the blank, that fill in the blank. In other words, what do we do best? Next. So really, this exercise requires you, with help from somebody like me possibly, to answer 6 really important questions. You know, what's your category? How are you different? That's the real tough one. Who are your customers? Where are they located? Why are you important? That's another one. It's really a tough one to answer. And when do they need you? And when you've got this crafted, you know, you're really going to meaningfully differentiate yourself. You're going to carve out some space in a very crowded brandscape. And you state your claim. So I'll show you an example right now of a company that we're all familiar with, and then I'll show you an onlyness statement that I wrote for one of my clients in Chile. So next. Little Harley Davidson. Everybody knows it. And this was written by Marty Neumeyer, the brand author, not me. And onlyness statements can be tricky. They generally should be read as sort of one complete sentence. It can get a little long, but the only motorcycle manufacturer that makes big, loud motorcycles for macho guys, macho wannabes, who live mostly in the U.S., who want to join the tribe of cowboys in an era of decreasing personal freedom. So their onlyness statement is one of the fundamental elements that shapes their brand story, as well as their brand promise, which is really the pursuit of freedom, as well as their brand personality, which includes attributes such as wild, adventurous, freedom of the road, etc. And then by building their brand story, their brand promise, their personality, into everything they do, Harley's maintained brand loyalty for over 100 years. And I'm not a motorcyclist, but I had many people tell me, their motorcycles aren't even all that great. There's a lot of companies that make much better cycles. But boy, do they know how to build and keep community.